A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, the Darksaber was one of the most influential and one of the most famous artifacts in Mandalorian culture. Think of the Mandalore's mask from the Knights of the Old Republic series, but make it into an actual weapon that associates itself with the Jedi. So today, I thought it would be a fun idea to talk about the Darksaber and how the Darksaber affects the Star Wars universe as we know it, and why it's a complete waste of total garbage and not really worth the time to actually talk about because now, according to season 3 of The Mandalorian, it means absolutely nothing. Back in the day, during the days of the Old Republic, in about 1050 BBY, there was a man named Tar Vizsla. Tar Vizsla was a Mandalorian who became and was inducted into the Jedi Order. Tar Vizsla went through the ranks of the Jedi Order, built his own lightsaber out of Beskar, and had a dark kyber crystal, of which he then declared it to be the Darksaber. As the Darksaber was passed through many hands throughout the entirety of 1,000 years leading up to the Clone Wars, the Darksaber landed in the hands of many individuals, mostly in the house of Vizsla. This would end up in the hands of Pre Vizsla, who would use the Darksaber to lead the associated terrorist group known as Death Watch and become Mandalore's next ruler. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why would a futuristic society based in outer space and the future past use a mystical black-bladed magical laser sword to induct rulers instead of using the, royalty system of which that has worked for lines of royals for thousands of years? Well, the answer to that is really freaking stupid. See, after Tar Vizsla's death, there was this whole thing called the Mandalorian Jedi Civil War, where the entirety of Mandalore was basically turned into a white ass desert, and all of the little spheres that you see on Mandalore are basically, little pockets where Mandalorians get to live without having to stretch the dead wastes of the Mandalorian sands. So that's just great. So while the Republic forces were distracted, some Mandalorians broke into the Jedi Temple, stole Tar Vizsla's lightsaber, ran away with it, and started handing it down through the Vizsla line for multiple generations until he got to Pre Vizsla. Now, at this point in time, it had been about 1,000 years since the lightsaber was stolen from the Jedi Temple, and a lot of people were going crazy about it. So, Pre Vizsla effectively wanted to use the Darksaber as a way for him to become the next ruler of Mandalore. Unfortunately, however, the person who was in charge of Mandalore at the time, also known as Satine Kryze, was not really fond of having a dude with a magical laser sword taking over as ruler of Mandalore when she was already being the Duchess of Mandalore and everything was going kind of pretty good fine. As the Clone Wars went on, the situation became a lot worse as Darth Maul entered the picture with his brother Savage Opress, and they started working with Pre Vizsla to take over the entirety of Mandalore by gathering an entire collective of criminal enterprises, having them try to attack Mandalore, and then coming in to save the day, making Death Watch the good guys, and allowing them to take over Mandalore without any resistance from the Mandalorian people, which admittedly is an extremely smart move to manipulate the masses into believing that you're the good guy when you're saving everyone from the guys who you control. It's very smart. I'll give him that. But then Darth Maul decides, okay, I have this entire criminal enterprise. I'm going to betray you eventually. So I'm going to challenge this guy to a one on one duel so I can gain charge of Mandalore and become the next Mandalorian ruler of this planet. Pre Vizsla, of course, agrees to the fight. He thinks he can take on Maul, but silly Pre Vizsla, he gets ahead of himself. This is when the traitor Bo Katan decides that she doesn't want any part of the situation anymore and effectively hightails it, saving Obi-Wan Kenobi from the clutches of Darth Maul directly after her half-sister Satine is killed by Maul, and Obi-Wan cannot do anything to save her. Just a tiny little insignificant a little bit later, Palpatine comes in, decides, oh yeah, I'm gonna kill both of you for shits and giggles, kills Savage Opress, throws him off a balcony, and then decides, no, wait, I want to save you for later. And then he starts electrocuting the ever-loving crap out of Maul, kidnaps him, the whole Son of Dathomir thing happens, which I'm not going to get into because that's a lot of content, and then Maul has the Darksaber back in his clutches. Over a decade later, Maul still has possession over the Darksaber, and Sabine Wren uses it while she is possessed by Night Sister magic to face off against Ezra Bridger. They destroy an altar, and Sabine now has possession of the Darksaber. This is where everything goes to absolute hell. Sabine has the Darksaber, learns how to use it, hands it over to Bo-Katan Kryze, who uses the Darksaber to bring together all of the Mandalorians, then loses the Darksaber to Moff Gideon immediately after and following the Night of 1,000 Tears, in which the one, the only, the bad motherfucker known as Moff Gideon basically glasses the entire planet and makes the entire place uninhabitable for God knows how long, which is actually a lie because it is actually habitable, and they rehabitate it at the end of Mandalorian Season 3, but we'll get into that part later. Moff Gideon then wields the Darksaber from whatever time the Night of 1,000 Tears was in, all the way until 9 ABY during the first season of The Mandalorian. Moff Gideon wields the lightsaber, then faces off against the Mandalorian known as Din Djarin, loses in a fight to Din Djarin, and has a nice little chuckle because Bo-Katan was supposed to take the Darksaber away from him, but in actuality it was Din who was the one that beat him in the first place, which leads to a whole heckin' a lot of concern that I'm going to get into. So, now that Din Djarin has possession over the Darksaber, nobody wants to follow Bo-Katan into battle because she is not the rightful ruler of Mandalore. But she does become the rightful ruler of Mandalore in Season 3 whenever Din Djarin gives her the Darksaber, which he was not allowed to do in the first place, but this time there's a technicality. See, you're not allowed to just hand the Darksaber over to somebody as a gift or as a yielding session because you can't just do that. You can't just give over the Darksaber, even though somebody else in this show literally handed over the Darksaber to Bo-Katan in the first place, which I know is extremely weird. But this is where the situation gets out of hand. Moff Gideon literally tells Din Djarin, you can't just hand the lightsaber over to somebody. It has to be won in a battle because it has to do with the story of the Darksaber. You have to win it in battle, you have to declare that you're openly fighting for it, and you have to beat the person who you are challenging or who is challenging you so you can wield the Darksaber. This is where everything goes to shit. There is literally only one individual in the entirety of the Star Wars universe who openly won the Darksaber after challenging its original owner to a battle. That motherfucker is Darth fucking Maul. Originally, the Darksaber belonged to Tar Vizsla. Tar Vizsla had his lightsaber stolen from the Jedi Temple by Mandalorians. It was passed down through multiple generations until it ended up in the hands of the one, the only Pre Vizsla. Pre Vizsla then lost a fair duel against Darth Maul for the right to become the ruler of Mandalore and to own the Darksaber. Maul had the Darksaber from that point and had the Darksaber for over 10 years. Palpatine and Ahsoka Tano never formally challenged Maul to a fight to have wieldership over the Darksaber, so those two don't count. Sabine Wren just picked up the Darksaber, so that didn't count. Then Bo-Katan is gifted the Darksaber from Sabine Wren after she beats, what's his name? I think his name is Gar Saxon or something like that, so that doesn't count. Then gives over the Darksaber to Moff Gideon, in which she surrenders to try and save the people of Mandalore, so that doesn't count. Moff Gideon then loses it to Din Djarin, which that also doesn't count, because he's not even the wielder of the Darksaber because he didn't even win it in battle. And then Din Djarin just gives it over to Bo-Katan because she, by some weird technicality, won it after she battled a weird-ass zombie spider creature in the caves of Mandalore, which that doesn't even count because Din Djarin got jumped and got ambushed by that spider creature who didn't even wield the Darksaber. So at the end of the day, the only person in the entirety of the galaxy out of all of these individuals who wielded the Darksaber and who beat their owners for the Darksaber and over the right to become the ruler of Mandalore, that motherfucker is buried somewhere out in the middle of the desert on Tatooine in an unmarked grave. I love Star Wars.